part of our responsibility beyond creating cool tech. We also have to be aware that there are finite resources. And as good stewards, as I guess adults on this planet, we have to figure out the most optimal ways to distribute and to consume and to conserve. We can mimic the state of the world on the blockchain and start to incentivize certain types of activities, looking to be the ones to create the solutions that find that balance and help keep us on track.
Welcome to the Bare Metal Podcast.
Everyone, welcome back to the Bare Metal Podcast. We're inviting everybody to come to the Gateway Conference in Prague from June 3rd to 5th. Don't miss a major tech event of the year. It's going to be packed with great speakers and conferences. Back to our podcast today, I've got Ishmael here with me from LOA Labs. Welcome.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So LOA Labs has a very interesting origin story. I want to dig into that. So you mentioned you guys started as LOA essentially a communications company, and then somehow evolved into or moved into running, becoming LOA Labs and running Validator. So, let's get into that. Can you tell us about how everything started?
Sure, absolutely. So Dave Fortson, he founded LOA, and basically the mission is to bring change making and impact and action to build a better world. So basically building movements. And so they've been very active in creating public goods and creating campaigns for the benefit of creating a more wholesome and balanced society. And, I think if you look at, just to draw a point, like you look at wartime and peacetime, and, at times, war may be more profitable, but I think we can all agree that we enjoy peace. We enjoy tranquility. And
I'm with you on this.
Awesome. So basically, LOA is looking to bring peace and harmony to the world, more of that as much as possible, and use various avenues to make that happen. So it could be marketing campaigns, planning the campaign, so planning the design, helping people who may, have, they're lacking access to the right tools they need to actually have their voice be heard. And so LOA was founded and has been successfully launching campaigns to help indigenous peoples, to help provide clean water, to help protect the environment, and, everything that we know that's important, and sometimes it's not so easy to do when we're faced with the challenges of an example, like you have a forest, right? And obviously there's lots of resources there in that forest. You can cut down the trees, you can dig up the minerals, sell that all in the market for profits. Then you can use the land afterwards for some other kind of productive enterprise. But at the same time, we have to, see that that ecosystem service there is actually providing resources to society, to humans. It's basically our life support system. Like, we didn't create air, we didn't create water, and most of the foodstuffs, the basics for it, we didn't do that. It's a gift to us, and I think that as people, as humans on this planet, part of our responsibility beyond creating cool tech, because we all love cool tech and we all love the benefits and the luxuries that it provides for us, we also have to be aware that there are finite resources. And as good stewards, as I guess adults on this planet, we have to figure out the most optimal ways to distribute and to consume and to conserve. So
Okay, so LOA was the nexus of people that met with this common goal, right? That we're trying to understand, how these systems work, how they're exploited, and how to promote change for the better. But how do we get from LOA to LOA Labs? Is that a spin-off? Is that a daughter company? Why did you guys decide to go into this?
Yeah, sure. LOA Labs was created because there was an opportunity in the blockchain space. Blockchain provides a new set of tools that allow us to create new solutions to help achieve some of the goals that we have. And I could say that transparency is a huge one there. I mean, often we look at these large NGO and centralized organizations, and we might be a little doubtful about their accountability and where the money is actually going, and are they actually making change.
Right.
And so with blockchain, everything is open and transparent. You can see where funds are going. You can see who's done what. And as we tie in the state of the earth and the state of ecosystems to actually on-chain data, often referred to as a digital twin, we can mimic the state of the world on the blockchain and start to incentivize certain types of activities to help, let's say, remember that stand of trees, that forest that we were talking about earlier. Well, no one really wants to pay to keep that forest there. They'd rather extract those resources. But if we can create systems to incentivize those who are either stakeholders or landowners of that land, and scientifically prove that that land is producing value, then we can make it worth your while to not cut down those trees. So we're looking at those type of solutions, knowing that if you reason out the trajectory of of consumption and growth of our population, if we continue on the same path, well, we're going to eventually consume all resources. Perhaps there'll be new technologies, new innovation, but often we want to, if it's not broken, don't break it. So there's a lot of good resources and good things that are already naturally happening for us. So we want to be aware of that, be conscious of it. And it seems like an oxymoron, but we have to kind of use tech to preserve and protect nature. And again, talking about like that optimization between choices or optimizing human society, we need tech. We also need nature.
Well, that's music to the ears of us software developers, right? We love using tech for cool stuff. So I'm totally with you on this. But I want to get back very quick to LOA Labs. So you guys also run validators.
Absolutely.
So why did you guys decide to run validators? What role do they play in LOA Labs? How did you pick your projects? You run several validators. So can you take us through this part?
Yeah, so the first one was Region Network, appropriately. The value proposition of Region Network is to create a decentralized ledger where communities can have sovereignty over the types of verification standards that they create that are applicable to their own environments. And so using a team of decentralized scientists and stakeholders in the communities, create methodologies that help preserve the state and help incentivize actions within their region that are going to be beneficial and balance. Like the needs for each community are going to be different. So right now we have lots of centralized standards organizations, and I applaud them. They do excellent work, and we model a lot of what they do. It's hugely appreciated that there are, for instance, carbon industries, and there are the UN standards for economic or ecological system services accountability. Like there are centralized efforts to preserve and to protect, and there's realization that there needs to be balance. But Region allows those tools to be in the hands of community members and other innovators, other technologists like ourselves who want to create solutions, want to create cool things. And so we saw this as a perfect opportunity for LOA Labs to validate and help the Region mission, because it's a mission that also LOACOM would have had and LOA Labs has. So they're both behind Region project and also various other blockchains that we validate on. And as a validator, I would say that the role of a validator, it's probably 50-50 technical and also community driven. And every group will approach the validation services differently, but at LOA Labs, we've created like a framework. So we call it the Validator Engagement Framework. And it outlines how we want to show up, how we want to approach the validation business. And we put lots of emphasis, on the public good aspect, on forging the relationships between the chains, creating regenerative financial opportunities between different groups, looking a lot at IBC to create these relationships, and product design. So helping people who have the technical skills integrate regenerative finance into their solutions, so that we have a holistic product at the end. We're not just heavily weighted into tech, or heavily, I'll use the term, 2D Genie. We have to figure out ways to also be Regenie, or keep it balanced. So I'll keep referring back to being balanced a lot, and optimizing a lot, because I think that's key. So I say the bread of validation is the tech side, because you have to have good working servers, you have to have great uptime, you have to be there for the voting and the participation in the community. You have to review the code, you have to know what you're validating. So all those aspects are important. And bread and butter, the butter side is, if your validator can also be an advocate for your chain, if you can help with marketing, if you can help with governance, help with community organization, and just show up in a good way, then you're adding another level of service to the chain. And validators are kind of like the senators or the Congress in a blockchain community. They have lots of voting power.
That's an interesting view. I don't think I've heard anybody expound this as in this way, because so validators are sort of default holders of voting power unless delegators vote as well, right? So it's in some sense a representative, let's say, democracy, and there is a certain number of validators which vote on these issues. I just wanted to point this out as an interesting insight. I see you guys also validate several other networks like Gravity Bridge, Juno, Quicksilver, and Stargaze, among I guess others. Those are the ones that we see on the in the observatory. So I'm wondering if you can just comment on any of those. Is there some certain, because there's major value alignment between LOA Labs and Regen. It's obvious from your statements. So I'm wondering if what you see in these other projects, like just pick one or two or of them. Just give us a short summary.
I'll list them all. Regen, Juno, which is an awesome smart contracts platform, and as we kind of touched on, is that we want to design products that can help incentivize positive regenerative action, and smart contracts is a way to transparently do that, and to manage the information and data flow. Gravity Bridge, very important chain, because we want to have the EVM Cosmos flowing as much as possible. Let the value flow freely. A lot of EVM chains are moving to Cosmos. You might have seen DXDY, and Kive is another one that we validate on and has recently launched, and we were part of that launch. And John Letty, I saw that you interviewed him, and awesome guy, super sharp, super smart, and the value proposition of a decentralized data lake is interesting, because we're always going to need a place to store data, and we want to have control of our data. We want our data to be encrypted and protected. And I think Kive is going to be one of the leaders in those solutions moving forward. So we were very happy to have the chance to validate with them, and looking forward to the next upgrades. And we just launched IBC, so Kive is going to be available on Osmosis and Axelar very soon. Those channels have been set up. So let's see, we got Stargaze. Now, it's an awesome NFT and smart contract platform as well. And they are very interested in public goods and also being carbon neutral. So Stargaze has been one of the leaders actually in offsetting their emissions. Of course, proof of stake.
So let me understand this. Is the foundation the one that's offsetting, or are they asking all the validators to offset their power consumption with carbon credits?
So one of the solutions that Regen has provided are on-chain in the Cosmos ecosystem, carbon credits, and nature-based tokens. So for actual, so there's a few levels of this. One is there's the carbon, and there's carbon standards, but then there's also regenerative activities that instead of just conserving, you're actually producing more. And they're nature-based standards where, and this is great because it's not the centralized organization that created these standards. It's the community of scientists and working with local partners that have created new standards for conservation and regeneration. And so these tokens now are available for purchase on Regen through osmosis. So there's a NCT pool as well, which is Nature Carbon Ton. And Stargaze community, they voted that they want to offset all their emissions. And even though proof of stake is way less than proof of work, still they want it to be carbon neutral, carbon negative. And so
that's amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Also, Gravity Bridge is carbon neutral, carbon negative. And I guess I should mention that LOA Labs was one of the major. Okay, so I was on the multi-sig account, and actually I wrote the proposals that that were approved by the communities, and helped transfer the funds to make the purchase. And so those two chains are completely carbon neutral, and those purchases have gone to actually fund regenerative activities. So it's happening. Like there are people out there who are land stewards, and they're preserving their forest, and now they can do more of it because Cosmos and these blockchains are offsetting their emissions. So again, that's going back to the circular economy topic that we were discussing, that we want to see a loop where people who are actually in the field doing the work, producing along with nature, working with nature as stewards to produce our clean air, produce clean water, to produce natural and organic foods, to be good stewards of land and of biodiversity. Because if you do not have biodiversity, then the ecosystem will collapse. And if the ecosystem collapses, then all of these services will no longer be available. And I think the estimate was about 33 trillion in GDP for the amount of ecosystem services that are produced in the world, that we don't have to do anything. So you look at the pollination of trees,
plants,
to create food, by the bees. No one pays the bees, but they do all that for us. And it's valuable because if not, we have to create little drones, or we have to create some kind of artificial process, or else we won't have any fruit, or we'll have decimal crops.
That's less funny, but I gotta say, I hope nobody creates a blockchain that funds bees for pollination. Like we already have Chihuahua, we're all good. But
I think
this is, I mean, becoming serious again. That's obviously like an astute observation that there are all these. That's we're essentially extracting a lot of its resources, right? We're extracting a lot of value that comes out of these automatic processes, but we're not really giving back or making sure they stay in place, and it's not reflected in the economy. It's not reflected in terms of assets. So these digital twins that can exist on blockchains are a very interesting way to model this, to allow us to somehow work with this together. So, I mean, all of this is fascinating. I had no idea Cosmos was involved in Regen and Finance this once. I've heard of Regen, of course. I have to invite them on the podcast. I hope
yes, do.
They'll accept the invitation. But going back to your efforts here, so you guys have worked on Stargaze to do these carbon offset purchases. What else are you guys thinking of, or what else are you guys working on right now that covers these areas?
Yes, so LOA Labs has been involved in lots of conferences, at Cosmoverse, put on greenhouse events to get together some of the major players. Some of these large standard organizations were there meeting with other actors. So we facilitate the conversations to get people moving and creating new products. And we ourselves we've got a few product designs to help regenerative finance in certain aspects, certain areas that we will be launching this year. So some smart contract-based solutions. And the premise basically, as we mentioned earlier, is to create the circular economy and to incentivize um, different types of actions that are going to be beneficial to the communities and to the stakeholders.
We've said, before we get into this, we've said circular economy several times. Could you define for the viewers what's the meaning of this term and why it's interesting in the context of the debate?
Sure. Yeah. In general, economies are circular by nature. By nature, money flows, value flows. Um, However, many practices and just I guess the nature of things will start to create pyramids and hierarchies and concentration of power. And I think one of the tenets of blockchain, I mentioned transparency earlier, but also decentralization. So no one controls blockchain. There's it's a network of autonomous, decentralized actors who share the same laws, which is the code that we're all executing together. And so when an economy is truly circular, not only does value flow, um, but it flows in a way that allows access for many actors who perhaps are excluded or non-banked or for whatever reasons, um, for maybe they be political or economic, socioeconomic reasons, they're not able to participate. Also, what we mentioned earlier about ecosystem services is that the trees are not part of that equation. We don't have them in account when we're looking at bottom lines. So inclusiveness means that all actors who are there present and creating value are accounted for and are given you know, incentivization and remuneration for what the services are. So, looking at it very holistically and making an economy or creating economies and creating systems that are self-sustainable, that they're not going to like, oh my goodness, I don't really want to get into this really, but you look at macro situations right now and they're pretty dire. And you see that we're having collapses. I don't know, in banks, institutions. We have the hikes that are going on, and it's just very stressful. Um, we've been levered up so much that it's not really sustainable. And at some point, you have to cut some bait. And
So in some sense, I think from what I'm hearing, it's also important to think about this aspect of externalities, right? So externalities are things not accounted for in these economic systems. And it seems to me that the circular economy, the idea of this is to include all these effects. So you can't sort of profit off of these externalities which are not accounted for anywhere, destroyed lake, polluted water. And this seems to me also really interesting in terms of encouraging positive action, right? So once you actually build accounts and you build those balances that reflect this, and that's where I guess the decentralized community of scientists comes into place, because someone has to rate what's a carbon ton worth, right? How many trees planted,
yes.
or something. So somebody has to do some research and work on this. There has to be some agreement. This is interesting. I have to look into this more. By the way, I'm fascinated by that by the topic. So you also mentioned, we talked about decentralization and transparency as two tenets, but also one interesting aspect is this aspect of tokenomics, right? Where you can experiment with different systems. Have you guys done any experiments, or are you thinking of any experiments around, modeling the circular economies in terms of tokens and applying the right tokenomics to incentivize people to hop on and be part of this game?
So I would say that it's not my strong suit, the tokenomics itself. And actually, getting into blockchain technology and crypto has made me actually study economy more and to start paying attention to macro events and to market trends, and to become a student of economy, because it is a huge foundation point in blockchain technology. Like, we all have these assets, and these assets have to flow. And I'm going to defer to Eric Wasserman of Phi Labs. That's the tokenomics guru, and I follow his Twitter thread, and I keep learning as much as I can from him.
Yeah, we love Eric here as well. He's been on the podcast. Hope to get him back again someday to talk about more about sort of design. We discussed more of the problems at that time. But back into this regenerative finance, circular economy. All of this is heavily related to public goods somehow, right? Which have to be funded. So, and there has to be a balance that's somehow struck. So the question is like, what should this process look like? There's even there are even clear parallels on chain, right? On chain, blockchains also have public goods of various types, and there's always a discussion about how do we fund this? Who should fund this? Who decides how this should be funded? So, can you talk a little bit about how you see public goods in general in this macro context, and perhaps look at various cases of how these should be funded on chain or off chain?
Yeah, sure. Often if we draw a parallel, we look at services like roads and sewers and water systems. Everyone benefits from that, and usually, well, not everyone agrees how taxes should be allocated, but we pay taxes. Everyone pays to have these public goods, or everyone contributes some way. So when we look at the blockchain infrastructure or creating refi products, regenerative financial products, one great aspect of them is that they allow for transparency. So we're able to actually see who's contributed and where those resources are being allocated and what was the result. And this allows those who are doing more work, and the community is going to validate and say, yes, this person, and validate as not as validator, but they will attest to the fact that this activity is happening and what its value is, and collectively, we're able to say, yes, this has value. This person is contributing. This person has proven that they've restored their area, and so we're going to make sure that assets that are here in a community pool are going to be distributed to them for them to continue that work, because we want to incentivize regenerative activities. So wherever that can be identified and proven, then we want to make sure that they are incentivized to continue that work. I think what's difficult a lot of the times is that people who are there in, let's call it the trenches, doing God's work, people that are...
They don't have time to do the proving, right?
They don't have the time to do the proving. They even know that they should prove what they're doing, because they do it because they know it's right. They do it because maybe it's what they know. Often they will have to default to other solutions, like cut down that forest or pave, or instead of having a forest, they might raise cattle. And so all these trade-offs occur because they weren't incentivized or supported in the type of beneficial activities that we wanted them to continue as stewards of that area. So if we want to preserve a certain quota of forest or natural systems or of species diversity, one, we have to know what that number is, and we need to be able to assess the current state. And for those actors who are positively increasing that state, to make sure that assets and resources are going to them so they can continue, and that they don't have to fold or collapse and just become more of the disequilibrium that we might be experiencing. It's always, there's many, I won't say disbelievers, but there's many who would like to ignore some of the conditions that are occurring in our environment, in the climate. And I think it's okay to have that idea that, everything's going to take care of itself. It's all right. But also at the same time, like being conscious, being an adult, being aware, being a realist, actually, that, it's logical that as we consume resources that are finite, if we don't change behavior or create alternative systems or regenerative systems, that eventually it's going to all go to zero. So at some point we had to change. And yeah, at LOA and working with partners such as Region, also ICSO Network, and many others in the space, we're looking to be the ones to create the solutions that find that balance and help keep us on track and our ecosystem services functioning well to provide all the things that we often take for granted, like clean air, running water, good organic food, sustenance. I mean, I don't know. One day we might have artificially produced air and water systems or food systems and everything.
Doesn't sound enticing even now.
You can genetically
Yeah.
modify lots of stuff, and if that becomes like the feedstock that humans live and grow on, it's a possibility. But it's a reality that I think we might want to have another option. So we're working hard on creating those solutions.
Yeah, let's hope blockchain helps you guys. Blockchain tech gives you guys new options and helps you find solutions. And I hope more and more people hop onto this. I will definitely look into Region much more than I have so far, just based on this podcast. So, on that note, I think we can conclude today's episode. So, it was great chatting to you, Ishmael. Thanks very much for coming on.
Yeah, awesome. It's great to have this opportunity to share a bit, and looking forward to checking it out and seeing more from you guys. I appreciate Bare Metal Podcast and the Observatory and all the things that you're doing in the network. So great work.
Thank you very much.